give her a nice welcome.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see all your faces. Thank you for coming. I appreciate that. Well, I hope you're as interested in hearing about vintage and antique toys as I was researching this historic topic. So let's begin. Today we're going to talk about toys, specifically toys in the attic. Now, this phrase has been used multiple times over the years from a play by Lillian Hellman. And, no, I think that's fine. By a play by Lillian Hellman, which was sort of like a semi-autobiographical play in the 60s, to an Aerosmith album, which I have over here. The most recognizable song on the album, Toys in the Attic, was a song in the 70s. To this film adaptation of the mentioned play in the first decade of the 2000s. Now, all of which had a euphemism of the phrase, toys in the attic. It refers to insanity. How this phrase became known with that, it's officially unknown, but in all certainty it focuses all about lunacy, muy loco, la cabeza. But today we're going to talk about the actual toys in the attic, and most of us have those. Two terms usually come to mind when we think about cleaning the toys from our attic, at least at my age. Those two terms are vintage and antique. Now, but what exactly is the difference between the two? If you look up the word vintage, usually you're going to get several references of high quality wine. But anyway, that's like a blanket term. But it's usually defined as the time that something of quality was produced. Now, and quality is exactly one of the features used to classify something as vintage. And this is because of the materials commonly used. Back then, now obsolete materials or technologies create a rarity in these items. Some of them from cars, classic cars, clothes that are worth spending the extra time on and maintenance, like a leather jacket over here, or furniture that we might decide to refurbish. But on the rugged side of vintage, you have the reference to the meaning of something simply of age. And we all know that depending on what age we are, that can mean different things to different people. But anyway, it's the specific age requirement for something to be considered vintage. This consensus seems to be 20 years old. And we can see this with our kids or even our grandkids. Those born in the year 2000 are now becoming 24 or on their way to 25, or some of them. And they're now getting their first grip on nostalgia. And they are moving into adulthood minds. And at the beginning, they're beginning to have the ability to look back on part of their life. Now, I'm sure we all have had this experience with this. We keep things for sentimental value for us and then hand them down to our children when we clean out our house, clean out our attics, we clean out our garage. After everyone has flown the coop, we can think back on those memories of interacting with those things and our children playing with them. Referring back to the different ways things were made and the standards of materials once used, it keeps things interesting from generation to generation. What was a typical toy for us is something unusual to the little ones, and that makes it interesting and unique. We may have been used to having toys that are made of wood and metal, even paper, and I have some of those on display, like the pull toy and the metal phone. And in some cases, this is a good thing. But other cases, things have changed. Now things are made of nylon, plastic, styrofoam. And some things are good in that way. They changed because if you'll notice on the table, there's this Cabbage Patch doll. Now this one was a recalled item because it ate children's hair. And she kept chewing, so a lot of children were afraid of it. But regardless of the material, toys have been a staple of development and been something we have held important enough to create it since the beginning of what we know. The earliest known toy was known on a depiction of a toy that was from a vase in 500 BCE, and you'll notice here it was referring to a yo-yo right here. Now the oldest toy ever found was actually a baby's rattle that dates back to 2000 BCE, which would make it over 4,000 years old. So we have always sought stimulation through play. Now these toys would be considered prehistoric now, so we'll back it up a little bit and talk about antiques. We've learned now that vintage is anything of at least 20 years or older, so where is the cutting off point? What does become an antique? According to the United States Customs Service, according to them, anything of 100 years old or older is considered antique. And in accordance with the U.S. custom laws, the Webster's Dictionary also states that to be considered an antique, the item must be at least 100 years old, regardless of what that item is. So anything 20 to 99 years of age is officially considered vintage, and once you hit 100, then it crosses over the line and becomes an antique. So when was 100 years ago? Well, as of today, obviously, it would put us at about 1924. Now, this is back a few years, but though we have been hand-making toys for our babies since the beginning, the first stuffed animal was an elephant here. This was made in 1880 by a German Steiff company, and it was intended to be used as a pin cushion because they were into upholstery at the time. Now this company would move on to be the first factory-produced teddy bears, this one here. Though in the U.S., the first toy manufacturing company was the Tin Toy Manufactory. Now here in the U.S., someone else had also an idea. His name was Morris Mitchum. He thought about a bear as a toy, and well, this bear was based on a cartoon that was in the newspaper at the time. And this cartoon portrayed President Roosevelt on a hunting trip, and he refused to harm this defenseless bear that was already bound up. So that's where it all started. They got the permission to use teddy bear as the name, and President Theodore Roosevelt gave it. Also, Raggedy Ann dolls. They came out around the same time as all this and was inspired by an interaction of a young girl with her father. The young girl found a doll up in the attic. The father drew a face on it and called it Raggedy Ann. He went on to write books about this, about the character of Raggedy Ann, and he introduced a brother named Andy. These dolls remained a staple toy through the 20s and were inducted into the Toy Hall of Fame in 2007. Now, when they were being sold back then, you could get a package of Lincoln Logs for 50 cents. Now a small package at like Walmart or Amazon is $45. And it's not just the price of living or inflation, it's the effect that affects this drastic price increase over the years, 100 years. It's the name, it's the memory. Everybody knows what you're talking about when you mention Lincoln Logs. You might find this interesting. This was invented by John Lloyd Wright. Yep, the son of the famous architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Albert Einstein's toys. He had a pegboard. This particular pegboard came out in the 1880s. And Einstein liked this particular item so much, he kept it nearly all his life. And he even took it with him when he came over here to the United States, which he gifted to a friend before he died in 1955. Now, this item is expected to sell for about $40,000 to $60,000 now. He had a set of building blocks he played with as a child at auction with Christie's for more than $80,000. And it originally only was projected to sell for about $8,000. Now, over the years, items you once considered more than fun childhood memory are now very, very valuable. Let's go over some of the most expensive vintage toys that have ever been sold. Slide number 10. This is the most expensive teddy bear ever sold was a Steve Louis Vuitton teddy bear made in 2000. It was sold at Christie's in Monaco for the price of $182,550 in 2000. Next slide is a 1963 G.I. Joe prototype. This sold for $200,000 in a private sale to a comic book collector named Stephen Jeppy in 2003. The next one is Barbie. This is designed by Stefano Canturi. This sold for $302,500 at an auction in New York. But you'll notice she does have a diamond necklace with the ruby in the middle. So, the latest one this year in 2024 is a 1979 Star Wars rocket-firing Boba Fett. Sells for a record-breaking $1.34 million. Now overall, though not the most expensive toy, but the best-selling toy to date is the Rubik's Cube. This was originally made to explain 3D geometry, and I've got one on the table. Even adults played with that. Now, if you're interested in seeing what kind of history you hold in your attic, here are some ways to go about it. You can find the age of a vintage toy by looking for a patent number, maker's mark, or a country of origin mark on the toy or on a box. Now, the dolls that I have on the table here, you'd look at the back of their neck. And if it says storybook doll on the back, you've got an antique doll. Auction houses such as Sotheby's and Christie's periodically provide free oral valuations to the public. So search on their websites for Valuation Day or Appraisal Day. And you'll have an item appraised. If you want that appraised, say like on the Antique Roadshow, who's a fan of that, you have to get a ticket. But these tickets are free, though. It just goes into a drawing. You have to be drawn. So if you're interested in getting into the hobby of finding antique or vintage, go ahead. Either one. Things to flip, you can find these at storage auctions, where people store their stuff. They forget about it, and it goes up for auction. Also live auctions, garage sales, even websites like Craigslist. Now, at this time, I'd like to show you my personal experience. Just hold it there a second. Now, this I got in an antique shop, but this was just a 100th anniversary teddy bear. And it shows President Theodore Roosevelt dressed in his garb, but it's not really antique or vintage. It was just displayed that way. Now, this was the doll that was recalled. This was the Cabbage Patch, and she actually would scare people with that. She could eat real carrots. Like, you would put this in her mouth.
Where did they go?
Then it drops down in her backpack. Drops down in her backpack. And you can keep her chewing, but my daughter, like the reason it was recalled, she has long hair, got her hair in there. It ate it clear to the scalp. She was yelling, I had to go get the scissors. Cut it off. Toys in the Attic here, Aerosmith album, vintage. It's from 1970s. Now this was my mother's tea set, tea and coffee set. It's sterling silver plated. I turned this into Sotheby's, but they said it wasn't really up to their quality of standards. Maybe I could try their list of other items, other places. So you'll run into that as well. The Lincoln Logs. I found this at a garage sale. Sometimes folk art toys. Now this might look kind of scary, but this was handmade from paper mache and my grandson loves it. He goes around pounding everything with it. Here is an old-fashioned phone, but this is made of metal and wood, so you won't find this anymore. And of course the wooden roller pull toys were very popular too. The Rubik's Cube. Now these are actually storybook dolls, and if you look on the back under her neck, it'll say storybook dolls. And these are worth a little bit of money. A couple more vintage dolls here. The one I did have appraised was this Chrissy doll in the back. This is called Chrissy. Now when I got this out of storage, unfortunately, something had gnawed her fingers and her thumb and part of her boot. So when I got this evaluated by a company called ValueMyStuff.com. It was $28 for the evaluation, but they give you points, so the more you get evaluated, you can get something free evaluated. Her hair would roll up by this roller in the back, clear up to the top. Then you'd push this button in her stomach, and it would make her hair go long. This is from 1971.
She could be best friends with the cat.
And you might get stuff from being an inheritance from maybe someone who passes away. Famous baseball was from my stepdad who passed away. He said it was famous. He couldn't remember, though, by the end what it was famous for. But
Is it autographed?
no, and mixed with the rest that he gave me, I couldn't really tell which one was famous. So you might want to document things as a tip. So baseball was famous, and our country's known for baseball. This is called a Beanie Baby. This is a weighted item, and this is good for ADHD afflicted children. They like the weight of it. It's calming. So just an interesting fact about that. The Santa, I bought that in an antique store as well, but then come to find out there's foam in it, so I don't know how antique it is either. But those are some of my experiences. Now, here at Ruthmere, we have what's called a stereopticon, and that's one of these where you can kind of look into a viewfinder, so to speak, so you can see that here at Ruthmere. Also, checkers. Board game was very popular, and you can see that at the Havilah Beardsley House Museum when you go there. The rest of these are just stuffed animals, which became very popular, became more of pin cushions. And upon your leaving, I left you some milk and cookies. One last thought before you leave. And if you go to the next slide. Through all the things we went over today, it goes to show that no one is too old for toys. We just appreciate them in a different way. So with that being said, I thank you for coming. And I think you have a tour, so it's going to be time for me to leave. So if you have any questions at the end, I'll be glad to answer them. But in the meantime, thank you all for coming.
We definitely have time for questions. You